Well, Arthur could stay with me, next to me, so give me strength. So, good evening, dear participants. As you may know, FINDH is an international human rights NGO, federating 188 organizations for more than 100 countries. Since 1922, FINDH has been defending all civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights as set out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. At this point, I would like to express FINDH's sincere appreciation to the University of Geneva for the leadership and collaboration throughout the preparation of the Human Rights Week. We appreciate the responsiveness and the open communication. Thank you. FINDH is very proud to be part of tonight's event and present the documentary Avortement, croisés, contre-attaquent, a powerful documentary presenting the action and activities of highly organized activists leading a vigorous campaign in Europe against abortion and the freedom of women to control their own bodies. A fascinating and worrying investigation into those networks of influence. FINDH believes that women's sexual and reproductive health is related to multiple human rights, including the right to life, the right to be free from torture, the right to health, to privacy, to education, and the prohibition of all kinds of discrimination. To conclude, I wish you all a great continuation, and once again, a warm thank you for all of you being here, to the University of Geneva for hosting us, and we hope you will appreciate the documentary. Thank you.
Hello, bonsoir. Yeah, it's pretty hard after this movie. It's not the first time I see it, but still, it's like, wow, very, very scary. So I'm Alice Vardassar. I'm the head of the Women's Rights Desk at FIDH, and I'm based in Paris. Antea, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm trying to figure out if these are already on. Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Antea Tedera. I'm the advocacy advisor on the UPR with the Sexual Rights Initiative. I'm Zimbabwean, but currently based here. And excited for this conversation, but horrified by the film.
Yeah. What we saw in the movie is, they call it like anti-abortion, anti-choice. We used to use the word more broader anti-rights and anti-gender movement. We have some elements that shows that they are everywhere and very structured. How do you define those people, those groups?
So when we're thinking about, I guess, this movement, we're really thinking about multiple kinds of conservative forces, and they're kind of loosely unified in the ideas against universality of rights, right? So they don't believe that all human rights are in fact human rights. They don't believe that they're universally applicable, and they don't believe that they should be enforced. So that's a component of it, as people who are actively working to undermine the rights and the standards that we have within the international system. And very often when we hear anti-rights and movements, there is a particular focus on rights that are tied to sexual and reproductive rights or to gender or sexuality in some way. But we can also see broader ideas being applied, for example, in areas to do with race or migration or things like that.
Yeah, we can see that at the end with Viktor Orban, and you can see the link with the racist ideology. Like
it's really the idea of we need to stop the, quote, bad babies from being made. We need to stop these kinds of people from coming into the space. And we must make sure that we forcibly have people producing as many babies as possible. And you also hear it in the rhetoric around Western civilization and the need to retain it or protect it. And there is an element of a competition in baby rates, right? So how populations are growing, the distribution of populations, the nature of the growth, right? So prioritizing population growth from things other than migration. right? And even when we're thinking about migration, it is also very clearly racialized. It's a fear of a certain kind of migrant, right? The countries, the states are afraid that there's going to be a bunch of Antheas at their doorsteps. So that definitely feeds into a broader far-right ideology. And we can see that the entry points for some of these conversations are bodily autonomy. It's women's bodies, it's the bodies of queer and gender minority persons that they're really targeting because they know the protections or the commitment of states is pretty weak. So if we start there, by the time we get to all of the other rights, it's too late, essentially, is what they're counting on.
And we see that they're doing a lot of lobbying in Brussels. And we know they are very organized here in Geneva as well. Do you see them?
Lots of the same
UN
organizations are present. The UN, so the ADF is there, Citizen Go is there, the Congress of Families comes as well. There's lots of like Family Watch International, which has like a weekly newsletter where they label detractors and all of these kinds of things. So the Sexual Rights Initiative is frequently in their newsletters as a feminist coalition that focuses on sexuality and gender. So we're seeing a lot of these groups that are present, very professional in the same ways that we've seen. They're hiring lawyers, right? So I think in many people's minds, we have a stereotype of uninformed people, unsound arguments in certain ways. But these are people who are very thoroughly trained in their ideology, who are presenting an interpretation of human rights law that is inaccurate, that is very conservative and narrow or ahistorical, and are clearly working on a very long-term strategy to develop relationships with states, to provide training to states as well. So they maximize on some gaps and inequalities among states. So I'm sorry, I'm taking a long time on this particular response, but so for example, we might have some states in mind that you're like, okay, these are definitely anti-abortion or more conservative. And then you might have some states in mind that are progressive. And then you have the kind of in-betweens, right? Which is maybe there are exceptions in the laws, maybe they have some stuff around conscientious objection. And what we're seeing with these organizations who just have so much funding is an investment in training countries that maybe can't afford to hire as many diplomats who are specialists in a particular area. And so they're presenting themselves almost as an external research. Like, don't worry, country of Anthea, you don't have time to develop a dossier on this thing, have mine instead. And because they're so professionalized, they're able to present it as a legitimate interpretation of international human rights law, and are able to consistently build on those relationships such that certain missions or certain embassies start relying on them for information, right? So they've made themselves indispensable to certain states, and in that way, it's also facilitating them being a very mainstream actor. So there are lots of confidential type documents that are being brought up. They're not hiding in the shadows. They are known. They're talking to diplomats. They have the badges that say where they've come from. They have ECOSOC status, which allows them to participate. Like, they're legitimate, in that sense, actors within this space. Yeah. And they have more money than us.
Yeah, that was my other question. And we can go back to the fact that they are using the strategy of NGOs, you know, they are using human rights
They are
language.
in fact activists.
Yeah, activists.
Like we are activists, yeah. Right? Yeah. And so it's almost like for every one of us that we can think of, like Anthea, I'm inside the feminist movement, they have at least one of me, who is just as clever, who has the same kind of training, this, that, and the other. And so they're taking it very seriously. And so
they are more money than from some certain state. That's what you said. So we saw Neil, the data that we know, both of us, and he explains like that there are some. We have the proofs of the money from the big Russian oligarch going back to other groups, like the one in Spain. And do we have an idea about how much are we?
So it's quite opaque, right? So it's not exactly the most transparent organizing, but a figure I heard in a meeting yesterday from the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy, in terms of some research that they did, was that they could find evidence of about 250 million coming into Europe annually from external funders. And I don't know how many of us are maybe tied to an organization or have done any volunteering. But that in itself, as the money that could be identified, is an insane amount of money to be coming into one geographic area for a year, right? So it's not like over multiple years it was 250. A lot of human rights NGOs, even if they're quite big, are probably not breaking that $1 million, right? Not making it by a lot, and excluding like salaries in Europe or whatever, but these are gigantic amounts of money, which also then ties into their ability to just have a lot more labor, right? They have more of a capacity to pay a living wage to continuously engage.
Yeah. I will leave the floor just in a second. It was just to start the discussion. I have one last question. We saw some of their strategies. So they're using human rights language, human rights bodies. They're using, petitions and the kind of stuff that we do as NGOs. And in terms of what, could you please share more about their strategy? What are their arguments, and how could we fight back? Because it's difficult, when you. Yeah.
So they're making many kinds of arguments, but I'll touch on one. And one of their most effective strategies is to pit rights holders against each other, right? They suggest that there is a limited number of rights that can ever be achieved, and so now you must abandon your solidarities and any coalitions you were in order to achieve them. An example that we're seeing in the Geneva space right now is if we think about the movement to address violence against women, right? There are many things that we understand about the continuing prevalence of violence, the continuing discrimination, all this and the other is taking place a lot in the domestic sphere. All of this information that we have, an argument that's now being made in the space is the problem, the true problem, the reason women are experiencing this violence is transgender people, right? So if you can abandon transgender rights, we can protect you, right? And so they're working very, very hard to make it seem as though all rights are necessarily in competition, that there is no social justice, there is no future in which all of us can enjoy our rights. There's someone that must win and there's someone that must lose. And you, the, quote, vulnerable people, must decide amongst yourselves which one of you is going to win and which one of you is going to lose, because it's not going to be everybody and it's not going to be them. And so they keep creating these arguments or providing the scenarios that says we need to protect groups of people as opposed to rights, right? Which sounds like it's the same thing, but it's not. Let me give you an example also tied to violence against women. Let's say there has been a marked increase in violence against women in the streets of Geneva, right? If we're approaching it with a protecting rights mentality, we will think, what are the things that we need to introduce to create an enabling environment to enable women to be outside, right? What are the protections? What are the things that we need to do to make it possible for women to continue to be able to engage outside and not experience violence? This is a model to protect the rights of women to be outside. A protecting women version says women must stay indoors, right? They must be indoors all of the time so that the violence outside doesn't get them. And so when they're making the arguments, it can sound like we're together, But when you start listening to what's the implementation, you see that it is actually to remove rights and to remove autonomy, and that's not what we want, right? Certainly within the Geneva-based human rights system, we're looking for the protection of rights, right? We're looking to make sure that everybody can enjoy their rights and not limiting the, quote, impact of the danger by removing people from the public sphere. And so they keep trying to protect the people and not the rights. Protect the children, protect the women, protect the this, that, and the other, but what about my rights?
Yeah, I really hate the fact that they're using the poster, mon corps, pas ton choix. It's like, they're using all the feminist language, and it's very clever, we have to say, from them, and it's very, very annoying to see that. And is there any question from the audience? Si vous voulez parler en français, je vais traduire en anglais. Yes. A mic is coming.
Oui, bonjour, bonsoir. Première chose, c'est un peu dommage de voir si peu d'étudiants ici présents. C'est des conférences très intéressantes. Je voudrais juste souligner le problème en Italie, je suis italien comme vous pouvez l'entendre, c'est la force naturellement de l'Église catholique. Il faut savoir que le pape, il est aussi l'évêque de Rome. Il faut savoir qu'à la télévision italienne, le pape, il passe au téléjournal quasiment une fois chaque 3 jours. Quand il y a une conférence le mercredi, le dimanche, il passe tout le temps. Et donc, il ne faudrait pas faire la faute de dire c'est la droite, qui est le gouvernement maintenant, qui amène ce problème. Parce que même quand il y a la gauche au gouvernement, ils ne s'attaquent pas à ce problème parce qu'il y a énormément d'électeurs qui sont catholiques et qui sont contre l'avortement. Ils ont essayé de faire passer en loi, je pense, qu'au moins un médecin qui puisse aider à l'avortement soit présent dans chaque hôpital ou dans chaque TOT, mais ils ne sont pas arrivés à le faire. Donc, ce que je voudrais dire, pour l'Italie, c'est encore plus valable, mais aussi pour les autres pays, ce n'est pas une question de gauche et droite. C'est une question de combien d'électeurs sont catholiques et qui s'attaquent à ça, parce que ce sont des électeurs qui amènent des voix.
Maybe one comment on that. There is a bigger version of the documentary, but it's only in French. And you will see a part on the power of Opus Dei and the Vatican that start the thing anti-gender ideology. That really, like what we saw, restaurer l'ordre naturel, their agenda, their program. It has been, we know, and it's proven, that it started from the Vatican. And then it grows and grows and grows, and now it involves many, many different religions across the world, and conservative parties and everything. But yeah, it's from Italy. And another thing, the documentary show as well the problem with the conscience clause, la clause de conscience, and the absence of regulation of this. 70% of gynecologists in Italy don't perform abortion because of this. And it's an issue, I don't know about Switzerland, but it's a real issue in France as well. We don't have the numbers. So first thing, we don't have the numbers because the doctors don't have to declare officially that they won't perform abortions. So then, when you need to get an abortion, you don't know where to go. So now they will create like a répertoire and to be able to go to a doctor and know that this doctor will perform the abortion. But there is a need, and the UN bodies addressed this and say to some states, you need to find ways to organize, because this is a question of public services and access to health, to organize your public services in the sense that even if you have the clause de conscience, objection clause, you need to find a system to regulate it and to be sure that we can access public services, and it's a real issue. But I don't know, and I'm sorry about Switzerland. Do you want to complete on that, or we take another?
Yeah, I think you're good.
Yeah. Je crois qu'il y avait une autre question.
I guess I could say something on that, which is just that in the Human Rights Council space, we're seeing like the interfaith coalitions as well. So we're seeing the influence of multiple different kinds of religions and their NGOs working together. And then also states that are theocratic collaborating with them as well. So we're really seeing the coalition or the actors expand into like a loose coalition of NGOs and states, also ignited by a religious understanding of rights beyond Christianity. So that's also been interesting to see how well they can organize together, actually. They're quite effective. They've been having more, so the Human Rights Council happens 3 times a year, and during these sessions, we're seeing a lot more parallel events and processes that they're organizing together to jointly start articulating some of their positions and their approaches to not just abortion, but to sexual rights more broadly.
And maybe we can, please just, if you have a question, just raise your hand or shout. Maybe we can say that we are talking about Europe here, but this is not only in Europe. Those groups are working and trying to do their bad work all over the world. They are very influent in Latin America, with all the evangelic, of course, and in the African continent as well, using different strategy. Like in West Africa, they're using the anti-colonial and anti-imperialism discourse. Could you share some about that?
Sure. So I think there's multiple things that's happening. What's interesting is also the way that they'll choose what the issue is to start their Trojan horse of conservatism. And so in West and also in East Africa, that issue is sexual orientation and gender identity, right? That is the entry point where everybody gets a hot head and they're like, it's un-African, right? You can very easily in the public sphere or in the public discourse make an argument, however ahistorical, about the plurality of sexual identities and gender identities, with or without a religious component. And so it's one of those issues or the topics that cross-cuttingly across the political sphere in some of these countries, people will be homophobic and will be transphobic, right? It's almost a national unifier of hate in certain ways. And so in a context where perhaps people are feeling constrained by certain things, like as the example of Ghana, their economy's been tanking, they've had to take like a new IMF thing, like everything is basically catching fire. A very convenient unifier for the state to detract from its economic problems was to talk about how apparently there's a massive LGBT problem, right? And so they will then frame the clampdown or the introduction of measures against this particular group of people as somehow tied to decolonization, which, I mean, is wrong for many reasons. The basic one being queer and trans Africans have always existed, right? We've just always been there. Whether you wanted us, whether you didn't want us, you know, we're already present. But it is a very convenient political rhetoric. And so we can see that in Ghana, we also see it in Uganda, and with the introduction of the measures by the World Bank as well, that's really feeding the idea that white people are trying to make us do this thing, and it's against who we are. It's against the natural order. So that same line about like the natural family then comes up in the African context tied to sexual orientation and gender identity.
And about the influence, to show that like we have the proof, like there was this big forum in Kenya and trying to reinforce the economical link between Russia and Africa, and one of the big events was like fighting, the title of the conference was like fighting imperialism and defending cultural norms against, the West. So you can show that this kind of topic, like trying to destroy the rights of women and LGBT people is a way for states, for certain states as well, to get more influence. Like for Russia, it's very crucial in their discourse to other states. I think there's a question just here.
J'ai une question. Dans ces pays occidentaux où on a le droit à l'avortement, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire contre ces groupes qui agissent justement contre l'avortement? Et aussi, est-ce qu'il y a déjà eu des condamnations? Est-ce qu'il y a déjà eu des plaintes justement contre ces groupes? Et est-ce qu'il y a eu des condamnations? Est-ce que vous avez des exemples? Est-ce que ça existe?
So about France, there was I don't know about, what they did, like les survivants, the one that do this with their hands, là. They put their poster in the metro, and they did something last year. They cover all the Vélib, like the bicycle that we have in the street. And they cover the Vélib with the other kind of poster, against abortion. And so there was another complaint against them. But we don't have for now, no, there was nothing. It's very difficult because there are associations. And then, as there is the freedom of association, they're really smart. It's very difficult to get them. And what we see is like in their discourse, they know what they can say in public. What is written in their agenda is very, very scary. Then you can see that the link with the fact they are racist, really, that they are that they are homophobic, of course, that they are machist and sexist and everything. But, they have this guy and all these, young people doing skate with their colors. But it's like, it's a bit funny because it's like how they act as if they were young, but it's like young in the 80s, no, with the skateboard and everything. It's a bit, I don't know, you don't want to party with these people. But so, no, what can we do? So when there is this big march, la Marche pour la Vie in Paris, there are other march, of course. I think it's always the same. The best way to fight those groups is to show that, to be linked all together. And as you said, Antea, they are trying, one of their strategy is to make people against each other. So a good way would be to fight for all rights. If you're fighting for the rights of somebody else, you would fight for universality and of rights, and we will be stronger this way.
And I think also just to jump off of what she was saying, thinking about like sexual and reproductive health services holistically, right? So when I was coming in, there was a petition, for example, for access to affordable contraception, right? And so it's making sure that we can exercise our bodily autonomy at whatever stage, right? Are we accessing contraception? Can we access abortions? Can we access fertility treatments if we want to have children? All of these kinds of things. And being continuously engaged in whatever legislation that is coming up that is talking about our sexuality and our reproduction, because they're always engaged. Whatever meeting, whatever submission, I don't know, they have interns who are participating in that. And so it's helpful for there to be consistent opposition so that they don't get to control a narrative. So it's not even necessarily so much about stopping them from doing what they're doing, but it's making sure that we're in a position to counter what they said. So if they're in a room, we're in that room also. And they say they're nonsense, and we say our very sense. And that's kind of what we're going for.
Thank you very much. It's now time for Dakota and Nadia, two dancers that are coming. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. There. Thank you very much. Merci.
I've been drinking, I get filthy when I leak again into me. I've been thinking, why can't I keep my fingers off it, baby? I want you. Why can't I keep my fingers off it, baby? I want you. Cigars and eyes. Feeling like an animal with these cameras all in my grill. Flashing lights. You got me fitted, baby. I want you. Can't keep your eyes off my fatty daddy. I want you. Yeah. I want you. We woke up in the kitchen, saying, how the hell did this shit happen? Oh, baby. Drunk in love with me all night. Last thing I remember is our beautiful bodies grabbing up in a club. Drunk in love with me all night. Love with me all night. With me all night. And everything alright. No complex, my body so fluorescent under these lights. Boy, I'm drinking. Welcome in my last invalid. I'm revving on red revenue. If you scared, call that revving. Boy, I'm drinking. Get my brain right. I'm a cognac against the wave. Louis shits, he sweat it out like fresh wigs. He wet it out. Boy, I'm drinking. I'm singing. On the mic till my voice hurts. Then I feed it up halfway. Then ride with my surfboard. Surfboard, ring it on the wheel, ring it on the wheel. I'm swerving on this, swerving on this big body. Been serving on this, serving on love is good. We woke up in the kitchen, saying, how the hell did this shit happen? Oh, baby. Drunk in love with me all night.
Mesdames et messieurs, la conférence est désormais terminée. Nous vous remercions chaleureusement d'être venus ce soir. Nous vous invitons à venir. Nous avons donc un apéritif en haut qui est organisé par les associations étudiantes d'Amnesty International et d'autres associations. Je vous remercie et je vous souhaite une bonne soirée. Merci.